Doctor's Opinion, and then 20 and 10 for Bill Story.
Well, I think many of you may know the
Otherwise, we
two
would-
gentlemen to the right of me, but these guys are real special to me, and they took me in this program when I walked in from the motel, and helped me stay sober, and I love to hear them speak individually, no less together. Very special for me and honored to introduce Richard and Alan.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Richard. I'm an alcoholic.
Good morning, I'm Alan, alcoholic.
I have to stand. That's the way I was taught, Liz. Right, Liz? I was always taught to stand. And I was taught to wear a tie. And I was taught, don't make the tie. Liz said, Richard, don't make that tie too flashy. You want to stay to the message. You don't want them looking at your tie. Right? That's. Yeah, I'm looking on you. You know, I look at Alan over here, and I said, boy, if you people had told me that I'd start to dress like my sponsor, I would have taken a little bit more time to choose a sponsor. No, in all seriousness, I spend a lot of time in Akron, Ohio, at Dr. Bob's home, and that's where the power of Alcoholics Anonymous, those seeds started growing. But here, I've been here a dozen times, and every time I'm here, I feel the humility and humbleness of being a human, of being a real person, of going through pain and going through hardship, because Bill grew up here, and it reminds me, you know, sometimes we look at Bill Wilson and we think, wow, he's a god. No, he was a person just like us, a drunk. And he also lived here, and so if you take a look around and just breathe in the air and just take a quiet moment, you'll know what I mean. I lost my voice this morning. I don't know why. Stephanie. But, you know, Alan and I are going to split up the talk. It's going to be hard. That's why we have a timer. Lou? Okay, thank you. And first of all, we're going to do the preface and the forwards
Doctor's Opinion.
and the doctor's opinion and Bill's story. I still need a sponsor. Right? But I just want to start off with something. And you know, I do a lot of big book studies. You know, I walk into the room and I hear highlighters cracking open. I get a buzz from the ink. But I just want to start off on page 10 of Bill's story. The second paragraph. And he's talking about his first meeting with Ebby Thatcher on Clinton Street. And he says, he talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays, way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed, my grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings, his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. Well, that is a real person remembering his past. And you know, alcoholics like me, I forget that I was a child. I forget the beautiful moments. I just remember the bad points. I just remember the bad. And so here, it really brings me back to my childhood, because it forces me to remember my past, good and bad. So when you walk around here, why is it special? Well, for you big book thumpers out there, you recognize a lot of the places that are referred to in the book right here. You know, Bill's grandfather next door with the little church, and Bill's school, and Bertha Bamford, and his relationship, his mother leaving, him being alone here. You know, his father, Mount Areolas. I used to always mispronounce that, remember? I thought it was Mount Areola. I have problems other than alcoholism. But when you look up at that mountain, remember what Bill's talking about when he has that white light experience and the wind blowing down from that mountain. Okay, that's what it feels like. And I'll just say on a personal note, when I come here and I feel human, I remember that not everything is good. I remember that hurt. You know, I'll share one personal thing because sometimes we have to share personally. You know, I got married in the church next door, and it didn't work out. And that just reminds me, even though we're in AA, you know, we're sober, I have to remember the hard times too that break my heart and breaks all our hearts, the past. So it's not all Skittles and whatever. There's sadness too. And that's okay. That's okay, as long as I remember that I'm human and that I'm not some sort of overly special person because I do the big book, okay? So I have hurts too, but it makes me a real person. You know, when we start on the preface, my sponsor says I'm a great X's and O's guys. Okay, oh, I'm doing oh boy, now he's like, go ahead, go ahead. I'm sorry, wait. This is a sponsor and sponsee talking. Go ahead.
So we'll do this first.
Okay. So, on Bill's story, I don't even have to open the book. Because Bill, when he talks about all of his experiences, okay, they're generated from here. And if we go to that paragraph that I just read on page 8, okay, that's personal to me. That's what I need to share about here today. And I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are. For that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, my background is in an intellectual area, but you know, AA taught me to be real. AA taught me, and Bill's story taught me about these 3 steps on the next page, you know, the conflict, the identification, and the hope. I never had that. What I had was pure fact. And this taught me how to do something that no one ever taught me to do. When I keep the big book personal, I get elation, I get sadness, I get confusion. Because as I grow in AA, every time I read the book, it's different. You know, sometimes we talk about these big book thumpers. I'm not a thumper, where I start to, for years, quote the same things over and over again. And it becomes like ash in the mouth. Because that means you're not growing, or you don't want to transfer over growth to other people and how you're growing and what the book means differently. That you don't want to, you start to hold on to old ideas. Okay? So that's why people before us, like, would say, catch the buzz, get the big book to come alive. That's what it's all about. It's not about memorizing lines, memorizing pages. And that was what Bill was about in his story. He was adaptable, he was moldable, he was accepting of new ideas, he sought out new ideas, and that's the way we have to stay. If I don't stay that way, my alcoholism will figure out who I am, my modus operandi, and it will find a way. It will find a way to get back into the mainstream of my life. So I'm always cautious, and I always try to learn, and I always try to understand the other person's point of view. And in AA, like Jeff said, there's a lot of points of view, but our common purpose, our single purpose, is to stay sober and help other alcoholics now achieve sobriety. Now, Alan's all rustled up here because I switched. I thought we were doing it another way. Relax. See, now, sponsees, you know, when I first came to AA, I mean, I needed a really strong sponsor. And, you know, I would listen to Alan. Anything he told me to do, I would do. You know, I got sponsors that go, well, I don't want to do that. No, I would do anything. So, but now, you know, when you get a little, the time goes on, you know, I start to go, Alan, calm down, relax. It's okay. You know, it's all right. We're okay. I get phone calls, you'll bend out of shape. Yes, I got that. But, you know, I always stay as a sponsee because sometimes I don't like following directions. But I'm just going to turn it back over to Alan because he'll button it up, as he likes to say. But as an X's and O's guy, everything that I needed to hear about somebody else's life is in Bill's story. The struggle, the hurting other people. And I always remember that when I come here. I always remember that Lois used to bring him here when he was on one of his drunken moments or months. She would bring him here hoping that it was the city that was the problem. It was the work that was the problem. Not that he worked, but that's not a tradition we're supposed to follow here, members. We're supposed to work. But the thing is, she would bring him here to get him a little dry and breathe fresh air. And they both lived the past here. When you go up to the lake where they met and they fell in love, and yet life goes on and there's hurt. It's all there in this story. So I don't need to quote line by line, okay? I just need to open up and read it as a life. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Good morning, everybody. Alan, alcoholic. Thank you.
He's going, why did Richard not just do X's and O's?
I was asked to participate with Richard in these things because, in reality, Bill's story is put in place with all the stories in the back to have simple identification. And before I came to AA, okay, I never knew anybody in AA. I never heard of AA. I didn't grow up in an AA neighborhood. It wasn't part of the culture. And, you know, I grew up with, when I came to AA in 1998, my first day sober was at the Jones Beach Sunrise Group, and I started going to a group called the Farmingdale Group, and all they had was a step meeting and a beginners meeting. And the mentors in my life were Liz and Ronnie and Leo. And I saw other people with big books. I finally asked, you know, what's a big book? Do I get a big book? And, you know, Leo would say things like, yeah, get a big book, man. Shut people up. You know, put it in a bookcase. It's a good place to hide your money from your wife. And that's what I did. I never read the big book. I didn't understand the significance of it. I knew that my life was unmanageable. I had burnt my life to the ground as a result of bad behavior, bad habits, self-destructive. I never knew what those things were called. But under the, you know, the whole pretense that John Barleycorn will do for you what you can't do for yourself, sooner or later, okay, having been a Pink Cloud two-stepper for almost 2 years, you know, the House of Cards all crumbling down. And I didn't know what to do. I never had picked up a big book. I knew my brother knew the big book. I did understand the concept of blind faith. If Jeffrey could get sober, you know, I could do it. If he could do it, which is Bill's story. If he could do it, I could do it. You know, I'll give it a shot. Okay? But I had no steps. He gave me my only nickname my whole life, fellow shit. You know, I just didn't feel a need for that. I wore designer clothes. I had a dark tan, a German car. You know, I'm cool. I got it together. I know what I'm doing. Willful, self-centered. Never knew what any of those things meant. Never knew that that was really the classic definition of alcoholism. But on a particular night, when none of that worked, I watched a movie called The Exorcist. I was as tanked as I had ever been, and called my brother and told him what had happened to me, and I told him I need an exorcism. Now, Jeffrey has crap like this all day long. And what does he say? Oh, yeah, we got them on every corner. No problem. I'll get you one. But don't play with my head. He didn't say it like that. Like he didn't use this finger. And so he sent me to an exorcist in the 5 towns, and the guy took me through the steps. There's a lot of independent people who take people without sponsors who through the steps, and the bottom line was I experienced it, and I can't tell you that I felt as free as the driven snow, but I can tell you as a sports analogist that I felt like I was not part of the junior varsity anymore. I had become a member of AA. I was on the starting 5. I could start going to step meetings and start sharing on the steps because I experienced it. You know, I was able to call a friend of mine in the middle of the night and ask for help, and he took me to my new home group on May 13th. He took me to No Frills in Levittown, and the journey started from there. And Bill's, all of a sudden, you know, this book became my autobiography. I could not believe it. I wasn't CIA. I used to hear that every single day in Levittown. I never had an order of protection against me. That's something you hear all the time in Levittown. Okay. Half the home group looked like the star of Cape Fear. You know, I was the hand puppet, you know, but I started to go to big book meetings. We didn't have highlighters. I used a pen and stars. And the truth of the matter is that I wanted to be like Bill. I wanted to give. I wanted to stop taking. And I met a guy. I asked him to sponsor me because I heard him share that he couldn't read Cat in the Hat. Okay? Now, I couldn't read Cat in the Hat either. I thought my problem was I was disinterested with reading, and I could only read Mike Lupica in the Post as I'm overdosing on the D train going to my last stop residence in Brooklyn. That was my safety catch for my self-destructiveness. And so the truth of the matter is that just like the beginning of Bill's story, I read about the belladonna treatment. Now, I'm a swimmer. Okay, love water. I'm obsessed with showering. I could do this. And, you know, I told you about needing an exorcism. I'm also was a psychotic golfer. I learned what golf fever really meant. That was me. And all of a sudden, paragraph by paragraph, line by line, from never having read a book since Mike Lupica, okay, all of a sudden, the big book became the first book that I would read. Now, they did tell me if you can't sleep, bring the big book into the bathtub. Well, if you see my book, it's like completely rippled from. But inevitably, I liked it. We had big book meetings every Thursday from the day we started. We converted them into big book studies because of people like Richard who really fell in love with what we used to hear from the Joe and Charlie tapes. From the time I came to No Frills, it was 2000. Jeff had gone to a big book study by Joe and Charlie. The big book comes alive, and he got me a signed autograph cassette set. So I have that in my little archive as a badge of honor. I'm not a big book guy, but I've subbed for Richard more than once on sexual harms. He's always away on business for that week. I realized that the truth of the matter is, I realized I took a couple of ambulance rides. I realized it wasn't just, overdosing on Excedrin and drinking. I drank on pills my whole life. I realized that, I needed Alcoholics Anonymous. I stayed because, at the very minimum, because of Bill's story and Bill Wilson. As a first-year member of the Sunrise Group, I went up to Stepping Stones. I just was speechless that I saw everything live and in color. The definition of alcoholism that Carl Jung wrote to Bill as a thank you letter for his 1961 letter thanking the founders. And he went from guy to guy. And, the fact that this is more than just, we'll get to that in a few minutes with the doctor's opinion. But Richard got sober, and I got a call from, I really didn't think I could stay sober in the winter. I didn't stay sober my first winter. I thought the winter is my problem. I'm a summer guy, the winter. And so I called Ronnie and I said, look, you gotta help me. I need help, okay? I don't know if I could do the winter. You got that new kid, that Jap. Why don't you get on a plane? He's got so much money. Go ahead. Let him buy a ticket. We'll go over to Dr. Bob's house and let these people see somebody from the Jones Beach Sunrise Group and the breakfast that donates to not only Dr. Bob's home, but Stepping Stones and the Wilson House year after year, and let them thank somebody, and the spiritual intangibility. Now, I had gone to college. I was enrolled. My father paid. And I was in Ohio back in the 60s and early 70s. And all of a sudden, when I got there, I realized this is my way of coming full circle, the total amends that I can make to the way I, experienced 4 years in Ohio. I can make all that change. And Richard and I have done an enormous amount of service for the founders' homes, including the Wilson House. We've been here through all three executive directors. It's a fascinating component to who we are and what we are, and all the gobbledygook that it's not AA, and yes, it's not AA as far as line by line, but where would any of us be if Shep Cornell and Cedric Graves and Roland Hazard didn't go and get each other sober through the Oxford group? Where would we be if Ebby didn't come to Brooklyn and start this whole ball rolling? Where would we be where a kid who was abandoned by his parents, who just split, got divorced and split? I didn't know that restless, irritable, and discontent, which we'll talk about in the next half hour, is who I am. And that the goal in life here is really, as Bill puts it, is happy, joyous, and free. And how we go from one to the other is how we flip it, and that's for tomorrow afternoon's kind of story. But, the Wilson House, East Dorset, Vermont, the Manchester story, Bill's story is from the time he was a kid all the way through his demise. I thank you for letting me share.
All right. Okay, Richard, alcoholic, and we call this a retreat, not a study. And for those of you people have asked me, it's a retreat. Do I get a facial? Is there a masseuse available? But no, actually, a retreat is. Thank you. A retreat is to back or withdraw away, to back up and get into your own life with the big book, rather than a line by line highlighting. But now, want to do doctor's opinion?
Please do.
Well, thank you. I was doing a preface and addition.
know, I see.
By the way, all the preface and the forwards, please. I know when I first came, I would hear that, they're doing the prefaces, and I was, I'm out of here. It is the foundation of our program, and it'll give you any answer you need as to a guiding light as to which way you should go, okay, in terms of the program itself, right, Jeff? It's sort of there. The mistakes, the people, and the turning of a page. Okay, the doctor's opinion. For you highlight freaks, I usually put right on top of there the start of step 1, right, to page 43. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you want it, I got it. Okay, and to whom it may concern, when Dr. Silkworth writes that letter and he cannot reveal who his identity is because he would be cast out of the medical field, that's an amazing thing that he would go out and write it, And that first paragraph where he talks about Towns Hospital, I don't know if you've ever taken the trip into the city to see Towns Hospital. It's still there, but it's a condo now. Only certain people like myself can afford to live there. As hopeless as can be, Bill W. Was I as hopeless as Bill? Yes, I was. Were you? I had a bad bottom. That was one of the best things that created a foundation, Alcoholics Anonymous. The basis of a rapidly growing fellowship. These men and their families, the men and one time over 100 others appear to have recovered. I didn't want to hear that word families in my recovery when I first came to AA. Alan used to say to me, go home. I said, but I want to go to the Seaford Serenity. But I needed to go home and try to mend what this program was designed to do, and that was to mend families. Okay, not only I can become a sober person, but if I'm not participating in life, society, and family, I'm like really, it's hollow. It starts to ring like a dull bell. When Dr. Silkworth didn't sign it and Bill asked him to write it again and write something else, he finally explained, and it was like a hallelujah moment, that allergy on his second letter, the allergy of alcoholism. Boy, that really took a weight off of my shoulders because it wasn't bad behavior. It wasn't warped thinking. That it was, but that was something else that I still carry with me today. It was an allergy. And if you're not an alcoholic, you don't understand that when I take that first drink, my body says more. And my body, physically, it's such a strong urge that it tells my mind to do it. And it tricks my mind to say, one more. I'll be home in 10 minutes. I'll be home tomorrow. I'll be home this month. It just doesn't stop. And so you're a real alcoholic. You know what I mean. And Dr. Silkworth knew what that means. And he was actually able to put it down in the doctor's opinion. the privilege. On the next page, XXVII. Later, he requested the privilege. I have to remember that word privileged. So many of us come to the rooms today, and you think like, New York State was running a program. It's not. It's a privilege. So if you're not respecting a privilege, you don't really understand what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. It's a privilege. So if you're not participating, and I know everybody here is pretty much a participator, but when I first came to AA, I wanted to, I knew I was stuck here, man. I was like, oh, geez, I got to be here the rest of my life. I knew it. I had surrendered to that fact. So, having an egomaniac as a sponsor was great because, he was doing all these things and I was being able to do this and that. So I was like, I'm going to be the best damn AA guy you ever saw. Like you, I was going to rewrite the big book. When you go over to page XXIX, the few simple rules on the second paragraph or the bottom of the required to follow a few simple rules. It's not like it's a requirement. It's not like, if you get around to it, maybe if you think about it, it's a requirement, 10, 11, and 12. It's right there. Dr. Silkworth if you really want to find out about a person who dedicated his life to alcoholics, read about Dr. Silkworth. Dr. Silkworth had one thing in common with us. That's why he was able to identify with us. He had hurt. He carried a hurt around with him all his life. They tried to have children just like Bill and Lois, and their baby died. And he carried that around. He knew what it was to be pained. He knew what it was to be pained. We all know what it's to be pained. So that's why he could identify with us. On page, oh, my eyes are going, XXXI. I didn't understand that page until someone said, put down man 1 and man 2. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I get it. The first one about Hank Parkhurst. Hank Parkhurst comes in a trembling mess. He is not well. I could identify with that. I liked hearing that. In rehab, they used to call me Mr. Shaky because I couldn't stop shaking. The nurse had to put that cup up to my mouth and to put the pills in. And my first night, they all laughed at me because from my bedroom, my boudoir at South Oaks, to the nurse's station, I crawled on all fours. I couldn't walk. I identify with that. And then, to me, he's a stranger. When you get sober, when I got sober, I'm a stranger to people. They like, Richard, that's me. Richard, that's you. It's not the 100 pounds that I lost. It's not the implanted teeth that I have because they had to all be removed because of rot. It's not the 2 plastic surgeries I had on my face to repair a lot of damage. It is me. It is me, how I speak, how I think, how I walk, how I carry myself, and how I treat you. I know some of you will go, oh, that's bullshit. He's such a son of a bitch sometimes. But the reality is, I didn't want to be recognized, but it was in a good way. Man 2, Fitz Mayo. This guy's out of his mind. I like that. Fitz Mayo, is hiding in the chicken barn. I can identify with that. For all of you who hid under a bed thinking, nobody knows I'm here, okay? Fitz Mayo is your man. And Fitz Mayo becomes one of the most important members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you never heard about Fitz Mayo, you should really look into him. And I give you all of this, and again, look, see, this is insanity at work. Okay, but I love the history of AA. Okay, the history of AA is all through the book. So if you want to make it real, if you want the doctor's opinion to be real, look at who's involved in it. Because sometimes we think these were knights in shining armor. They're not. They crapped in their pants just like I did. They threw up just like I did. And that's who Dr. Silkworth is addressing this to. The last page of the doctor's opinion. However, he did become sold on the idea that contained in this book. What is contained in this book? The program, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's one thing I always like to share in Big Book studies that really pisses people off. And I like pissing people off. First of all, on the list of other books, people go like, other books? We got other books? Yeah, we got other books. The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. An interpretive commentary. Bill is talking about his experiences with it. You can't read it and do your step work based on his experience. Okay? He's in the middle of the deepest depression he's ever experienced, and he's writing this book, and he's doing a little hanky-panky on the side. Not a good example to follow. And on the next cover sheet, and I know some of the guys I've sponsored take this with them, and then it irritates the shit out of me. How thousands of men and women have recovered, and I always ED recovered, and I hear my sponsors say that, I go, oh God, they thought it up. But the thing is, if I'm good for today, if I haven't thought about a drink to solve my problem, I am today a recovered alcoholic. Okay? So don't let anyone go, we're never recovered, we're always sick. I didn't say we're cured. I said recovered for that day, and my actions, my motives, and every step I take is correctly motivated. Thank you. I can go on. I'm not an easy guy to sponsor. Look at Alan, he's getting old.
Alan Alcoholic.
Alan.
Briefly on the X's and O's of what's in this, what always sticks out for me is, when we are in the grip of the grape, and really when we're about to get to a condition that I think we all acknowledge and call it bottom. Dr. Silkworth says we need some kind of a moral psychology. That there are powers of good outside the synthetic knowledge. In 1976, I had testicular cancer and many years of treatment. And the only reason why I'm telling you this is I was advised by a doctor I was in love with, my oncologist, and he said to me, Alan, you are not going to die from cancer. But he didn't know how to say the words directly. He said, if you don't change the manner in which you're living, you are not going to make it walking with trucks in the garment center very long. And that went in one ear and out the other. Somebody had asked me if I would be part of a new volunteer group at a Sloan Kettering, patient-to-patient volunteers. It was just conceived there. I couldn't understand it, but they wanted guys who were in remission to go help the newcomer in the admissions department and get over the quell of anxiety of coming in and walk them through the process. I had no idea how we got that idea, but I loved doing it. And so in 1998, I owned a dry cleaner, and this is like 15 minutes before CVS bought every drugstore on Long Island. I was an unofficial partner with the guy who owned the pharmacy next door, and he was self-supporting from my contributions. And when you're drinking all day on these things, you know, you're taking a lot of naps. And I saw the synchronicity of what happened in my story when it comes to doctors and Dr. Silkworth. I did call Jeff. He did give me advice. And I went to that pharmacist, and I threatened his life. You cut me off, and I'm never going to make it. And he says, I have a phone number for you. Now, he gave me a phone number of a doctor, and I'm thinking, you know, script writer, you know, that whole thing. Like, I need to go to a diet doctor. And the bottom line is I go to the guy, okay, I'm detoxifying. I think I'm doing good because now I'm just drinking. And he sits down and he says, oh, how can I help you? And I talk to him like he's, you know, a waitress. And he's ricocheting. Now, he's a really good-looking guy in those days. He's about my age. He had a Jewishy kind of little mini fro, all dressed to the nines. I'm thinking he can't be a real doctor. You know, I mean, he takes me into his office. His name was Robert Z. Goldstein. He was the head detoxologist at Central General Rehab, which is now called North Shore Plainview. And he showed me the degrees that were behind his desk. And he said, do you understand what this means? Nephrologist, detoxology. And all of a sudden, I realized that I was experiencing ego suppression at depth, that the jig was up. There's no more wiggle room. I'm not going to be able to, like, just make believe this didn't happen and, you know, go out and start all over again. So they ask you the question, most people have been, you know, in a pre-workup situation. You know, what do you do? What do you use? But, you know, a couple of beers, this and the other thing. He said, well, let me draw some blood. He draws blood and says in the kindest way, come back the day after tomorrow and bring your wife. So I bring my wife. I'm now explaining the softer, easier explanation to why we're going here and the depth of how bad this really is. And he said to me quite briefly, look, here's the story. You either need to go into a hospital. I got a business. I got shit to do. I mean, I am busy. Hospital. A detox or a rehab. I'm thinking Mickey Mantle with a Sandy Koufax had a bad shoulder. I'm not doing that. Or you can go to AA. That's out. Or a drug and alcohol counselor. Private therapy. Sounds okay for a kid who grew up, his mother was in therapy to this day. She's probably in therapy up there. And the bottom line was, I go to therapy, I go see a guy, and first meeting is chit-chat. And the second, and my wife is with me. And the second meeting, just like out of that chapter of Living Sober, the guy tells me, just me and him, and I'm thinking, how many of these $85 sessions of chit-chat am I going until I get cured? And of course, he tells me, you know, I have other clients, nice kids like you and your wife, and, you know, they met in school and they had a sexual relationship and they got married. Now she wants to have kids. So she stopped, and he cannot. And he said, and he had to come here because he never had sex sober. And I'm going, oh my God. I never had sex sober either. And I don't know if this is humanly possible.
How'd that work out for you?
Like in Living Sober, it goes away after a time. So, but I did say to myself, I'm out of here. I cannot do $85 3 days a week for chit chat. I called Dr. Silkworth, Robert Z. Goldstein. And I said, I need to go to AA. And he picked up the phone and he called two men, Leo Hurley and George Benedict. And they told me, get your ass over to the Farmingdale meeting. We'll see you there at 7:30 on Friday night. And that's what it all started. And I went there, and my brother helped me go through the steps with an independent guy. I got back to the Sunrise Group, and I realized that the way Carl Jung phrased it to Bill about Roland Hazard, that more than just physical doctoring, that this is that we are spirit until spirits sniff this out. And we come to AA, we go to the Wilson House, we go to Stepping Stones, we go to Dr. Bob's, we live in the Solution. And we come because of spirit. And that's what's worked for me. I'll always be indebted to Dr. Goldstein. He gave me a vial. It did say, may cause drowsiness. It was a placebo. They didn't have blockers then. They used placebos. I take one of these pills, I am like out for the count. I'm making more coffee than Juan Valdez at the meeting. I'm going through the steps. I'm doing service. And, Dr. Silkworth had somebody in the synchronized story of AA that he never knew. Well, he knew, but never met, never conspired with. But he went to work at Towns in 1929. He had lost his job, started over, and had a bottom, as Richard described. At the same time, this woman, Sister Ignatia, had a similar experience. Okay, understood bottom, understood the Irish pledge from the famine and the plague of alcoholism in Ireland. Know the whole concept of a nervous breakdown, needing to surrender, the early days of psychotherapy. So they gave her a job, not as a music teacher anymore, but a head administrator at St. Thomas Hospital. Worked in the emergency room before Dr. Bob with a guy named Dr. Scuderi, and understood the medical practice of detoxification twinned with the spiritual solution. And I want to finish this reading one quick paragraph from this biography that just amazed me, that on both sides of the planet, they all came up with the same idea. Sister Ignatia listened to Dr. Bob Smith when they met for the very first time, trying to explain a detox and a rehab at St. Thomas Hospital. The curious fact that this doctor embraced a spiritual approach to restore the health to alcoholics other than the physical remedy. She recognized this fact when he, the doctor, spoke of the alcoholic's need for an unconditional surrender to a powerful and vital life force, a God of his or her own choosing, one who could replace the fear and emptiness left by alcohol. Smith said he could not fully explain the steps to sobriety because they involved spiritual forces over which neither he nor the alcoholic had any control. He told Ignatia that as he had repeatedly witnessed alcoholics in the grip of the grape, admitted his or her own problem and surrendered alcohol and its accompanying unmanageability wholly to God, a seemingly conversion occurred. Often this was extraordinarily dramatic in its effect on the alcoholic's entire lifestyle and mental outlook. Gone were alcoholic denial, guilt, and remorse, the useless emotions that froze alcoholics in their own revealing symptoms. In place of these wasting emotions stood acceptance, honesty, and willingness to change. Proud egos, humbled by their own powerlessness, collapsed and became teachable.
All right.
God bless Dr. Silkworth.
All righty.
We're done. Thank you.
10 more minutes, that's it. Thank you very much. And I know that's like, where's step one? But there is step one, that's surrender. And I needed to surrender to Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you really read about the, not only doctor's opinion, we identify with that. But also, my big thing is read the forwards, learn about your family's past, learn about its current state of affairs, learn about what we can do in the future. Okay, that's my surrender to AA, and it's all right there in the forwards. If you need to have like a reference of, what is this should I do? What is this should I do? I turned Italian. It really somehow is in those forwards. Okay, in the forwards are the basics of our program and the basics of how I can live within Alcoholics Anonymous, having done step one. Thank you.